What DNA tests get wrong about American ancestry? Millions of Americans have taken a DNA test. They spit into a tube, they seal the envelope, they wait. And when the results arrive, something strange happens. Some people feel validated. Some feel confused. Some feel unsettled. Some feel like the story they were told about themselves just cracked open. Families argue. Group chats light up. Old stories are questioned. New ones are invented. And almost everyone walks away believing the same thing, that they now know who they are. But here is the uncomfortable truth. DNA tests do not lie. They also do not tell the truth the way most people think they do. In fact, some of the most common conclusions people draw from DNA tests about American ancestry are quietly wrong. Not maliciously wrong. Not foolish. Just wrong in ways that feel convincing because the presentation looks scientific. Percentages, maps, charts, clean labels. They feel definitive. But ancestry is not clean. American ancestry least of all. And today we are going to explain exactly what DNA tests get wrong about American ancestry, why so many people misunderstand their results, and how to read them without turning data into myth. If you have ever looked at your DNA results and felt like something didn't quite add up, subscribe now. This channel exists to explain the parts of ancestry testing that companies don't have time, space, or incentive to explain. Let's start with what people think DNA tests do. Most people believe a DNA test tells them three things: where they come from, who they are related to, and what that means about them. That belief feels reasonable. After all, DNA is real. It is physical. It feels objective. But here's the first thing DNA tests get wrong in the minds of consumers. Your DNA test is not a biography. It is a statistical comparison. When you submit a DNA sample to an ancestry company, the test does not search history. It does not read records. It does not know your ancestors' names, occupations, religions, or social status. What it does is compare segments of your DNA to reference databases made up of living people who self-report ancestry from particular regions. That's it. Your result is not where your ancestors were. It is who you most closely resemble in our current database. This distinction matters more in America than almost anywhere else, because American ancestry is layered, repetitive, and distorted by history in ways that DNA tests struggle to model accurately. This brings us to ancestry percentages. Those colorful charts are the centerpiece of DNA testing. British Isles, Scandinavian, West African, Indigenous Americas, Southern European. They feel like ingredients in a recipe. But ancestry percentages are not fixed truths. They are estimates, they are probabilities, and they are constantly changing. If you have tested with the same company for several years, you may have noticed your percentages shift. 5% becomes 8, 10 becomes 6. Regions appear, regions disappear. People assume this means the test got better. Sometimes it did. Sometimes the math just changed. Ancestry percentages depend entirely on reference populations. If a company adds more samples from a region, reshapes categories, or refines how it labels groups, your results shift without your DNA changing at all. This is why one company might tell you that you are Irish, another that you are British, and a third that you are Northwestern European. These are not biological borders. They are statistical conveniences. There is no single British Isles gene. There is no genetic switch that flips between Irish and English. There is no Viking marker that lights up when someone has Scandinavian ancestry. What exists are overlapping populations with shared history, migration, and mixing stretching back thousands of years. When people say, "My DNA says I'm Scandinavian," what they often mean is, "My DNA looks similar to modern people in Scandinavia." That is not the same thing. Nowhere is this confusion more intense than in American ancestry. America is a genetic paradox. On one hand, it is one of the most diverse populations on Earth. On the other hand, large parts of its population descend from surprisingly small founding groups. This is the part DNA tests struggle with the most. Early American populations were not vast and fluid. They were small, isolated, and repetitive. Families intermarried, communities stayed closed. Migration slowed for long stretches of time. This created something geneticists call pedigree collapse, where the same ancestors appear over and over again in a family tree. In practical terms, this means many Americans are not descended from one colonial ancestor once. They are descended from the same colonial ancestors dozens or even hundreds of times through different lines. DNA tests are very good at detecting shared ancestry. They are not good at explaining repetition. So when someone discovers they are related to a famous early American figure, they often assume that connection is meaningful in a personal sense. It usually isn't. You can share ancestry with someone without sharing influence, wealth, culture, or identity. You can inherit a surname without inheriting DNA. You can inherit DNA without inheriting opportunity. This is one of the most important things DNA tests get wrong by omission. They flatten history. They treat all ancestors as equal contributors, when in reality ancestry is shaped by bottlenecks, survival, and social structure. This leads us to haplogroups. Haplogroups are among the most misunderstood features of DNA testing. Why DNA haplogroups track the direct paternal line? Mitochondrial haplogroups track the direct maternal line. They are powerful tools for studying deep human history. They can tell us about ancient migrations, population splits, and broad geographic origins. They cannot tell you who you are. Haplogroups follow a single thread through your family tree, ignoring the vast majority of your ancestors. By 10 generations back, you have over 1,000 genealogical ancestors. Your haplogroup represents exactly one of them. Millions of people share the same haplogroup. Having a particular haplogroup does not mean you belong to a tribe, a culture, or a historical identity. It means one thread of your ancestry traces back to a population that existed in a particular place long ago. That's it. When people use haplogroups as identity markers, they are mistaking tools for labels. DNA tests also get something else wrong, not because of the science, but because of what they cannot see. DNA does not see culture. DNA does not see law. DNA does not see class. Your DNA test cannot tell you which doors were open to your ancestors and which were closed. It cannot see inheritance laws, segregation, religious exclusion, or social networks. Two people can be genetically similar and live radically different lives depending on where and when they were born. This matters enormously in American history. For centuries, access to land, education, wealth, and safety was structured by forces DNA cannot detect. Race, class, religion, gender, and legal status shaped outcomes far more than genetics ever could. This is why ancestry without history creates myths. People see shared DNA and assume shared experience. They are not the same. Now let's talk about the emotional side of DNA testing, because this is where misunderstandings become personal. DNA tests disrupt family stories. They reveal adoptions. They expose misattributed parentage. They contradict long-held beliefs. When this happens, people often feel betrayed. They assume someone lied. Sometimes that's true. Often it isn't. Families pass down stories to create continuity, not accuracy. Silence is sometimes protection, sometimes shame, sometimes survival. DNA reveals biological relationships. It does not explain human ones. Finding out that a grandfather was not biologically related does not erase the life he lived or the role he played. It expands the story rather than replacing it. This is another place where DNA tests get misunderstood. They answer biological questions. They do not answer meaning. So what are DNA tests actually good at? They are excellent at finding relatives. They are excellent at confirming or ruling out specific genealogical connections. They are powerful tools for reconnecting lost branches of families. They are invaluable for population-level research. DNA works best when paired with documents, geography, and historical context. DNA is not a verdict. It is a flashlight. It shows you where to look next. The disappointment many people feel after DNA testing comes from a mismatch of expectations. They expect identity, they get data. They expect certainty, they get probability. They expect a story, they get fragments. But here's the deeper truth. You do not come from percentages. You come from survival events repeated over generations. American Ancestry is not a smooth blend. It is a record of who survived, who reproduced, who stayed, and who was pushed out. DNA tests cannot fully capture that story on their own. That is why this channel exists. We are not here to dismiss DNA testing. We are here to contextualize it, to explain why American Ancestry is especially complex, why founder effects matter, why bottlenecks distort identity, why Ancestry is as much about absence as presence. If you want to read your DNA results correctly, here is the mindset to adopt. Look for patterns, not labels. Focus on relatives, not regions. Combine genetics with records, geography, and history. Treat surprises as starting points, not conclusions. The most important thing your DNA test gives you is not an answer. It is a question about how your family passed through history, about which bottlenecks they survived, about which stories were preserved and which were erased. In future episodes, we are going to explore those bottlenecks in detail, the small populations that expanded into millions, the families that misunderstood their own origins, the lineages that disappeared from records but remained alive in DNA. If you want to understand American Ancestry without turning science into mythology, subscribe now. This channel is built for long-form thinking in a short-attention world. DNA does not tell you who you are. It tells you where to start looking. And once you learn how to ask better questions, Ancestry stops being a label and starts becoming a map. We'll see you in the next video.